I am Debbie Rennie, and I'm here to interview my mother, Joan Horst Routh, who spent time in Europe at the event of Hitler's campaign. And I will be asking her questions, and she will be responding with her memories of that time. In June of 1939, when Hitler defeated the French army, your residence was in Paris, but you spent your summers in Norway with your grandmother. At the time, you were in Norway. Tell us about the situation in Norway that prompted your return to Paris early that year.
Well, the war had already broken out in Europe, and it was time for us to return anyway because we were booked on a ship, and the passage left in September of that year. And we went on a Norwegian cruise ship, and on the ship we were not allowed to be without our life preservers, so we slept with them and wore them the whole time. As far as myself and my brother and sister were concerned, we thought that was pretty funny that we had to sleep with life preservers, but I know my father was no doubt frantic because there were mines in the ocean and we never knew whether we were going to hit one or not. And actually, the ship got us safely to France where we disembarked, but on its way back to Norway, it hit a mine and everybody perished. So God was gracious to us.
On June 15th of 1940, the German army marched into Paris down the Champs-Élysées. What do you remember about that?
Well, I remember my dad telling us, let's go to the Champs-Élysées. The German soldiers are going to march in, and that should be quite a spectacle. Well, we did, and we stood right on the Champs-Élysées as the Germans marched in and tankers followed, and there was a lot of booing and hissing because the French just really hated the Germans.
You remained in Paris almost 4 months. Tell us about your memories of the gas masks and whistles and the nightly air raids.
Well, in school we were all given whistles and a gas mask, and we had to carry those to school every day. The whistle was in the event that we had been hit by a bomb and were laying under rubble, that we could whistle if we were still alive so they could find us. And the gas masks were there because there was threat of gas bombs falling. There were nightly air raids, not every night, but most nights. But my grandmother made this very exciting because she had bags of candy and blankets that we all put on us, and we sat down in the wine cellar. Actually was the escape, and we kids thought it was wonderful because we could eat as much candy as we wanted. So it was a game, but it got old after a while. We were jacked out of bed most any time during the night.
Have any of you had the opportunity to visit Paris and gone to the Eiffel Tower? Mom, tell us about your experience there with the German soldiers.
Well, when the Germans came into Paris, the French military disconnected all the elevators that go to the top of the tower so that the Germans would have to walk up, and it's a long spirally staircase all the way to the top. But the wonderful thing about it was, and we lived right by the Eiffel Tower, now we could go up the Eiffel Tower without paying a fee because there was no more fees to go up. And as we would get up the steps, the German soldiers would come down and lift us up to the next rung, and to us it was fun.
Tell about your experience with the German soldiers in the park.
Yeah, my sister and I would go to the park with our dolls and play in the sandbox, and there were 2 German soldiers that sat on a bench in the park, and they were peeling an orange, and we had not seen an orange for a long time. And after they peeled the orange, they held their hand out to tell us, "Would you like some?" And we looked at each other and we remembered all the warnings we had received from the housekeepers in my grandmother's home. Do not talk to the Germans, do not take anything from them because it's poison and you'll die. Well, being children and the orange was very tempting, we went and got a slice of orange, and oh, it was so delicious. And we were just thrilled. We didn't die, and we went back to the house and told all the housekeepers, "That's not true. We had orange and we're still here."
In October that year, your grandfather's cousin, who was a high-ranking officer in the German army, came to your home for dinner. What did your grandfather learn from him, and what happened next?
Well, apparently the high command, German high command, had told him that you better get your family out of Paris because they're going to intern all the Americans in prison camps. And so my father must have made preparation to go to Switzerland with us. My grandparents went back to America. Oh, as we were on the train going to Switzerland, the German Gestapo came into our compartment and wanted to know, see our passports and the permission to go to Switzerland. And my father had warned us, do not say a word, don't speak English or German or French, just be quiet. And they looked at our passports and said everything was in order, closed the door.
You had family in Switzerland that helped you get situated in an apartment there. You already knew English, French, and Norwegian, but you then went to a German school and had to learn German. There was food rationing because food was so scarce. Tell us about that.
Well, we had meatless days, except for once or twice a week we were allowed a meat ration. Otherwise, it was vegetables. For a family of 5, we were allowed 1 loaf of bread a day. And that seems like a lot, but with hungry teenagers and hunger because we couldn't get anything we wanted, it was a hardship. In order to satisfy our hunger coming back from school, our snacks were boiled potatoes and Swiss cheese. Swiss cheese was available in abundance since it's made there.
Switzerland was neutral, so there was no fighting there. Tell us about the accidental bombing.
The school that I attended had been bombed by one of our B-52 bombers. And the reason for that was they were making an emergency landing and they wanted to get rid of their bombs, but they missed the target and my school was bombed. So many of my classmates and teachers perished in that. And I remember the ambulances going by our home, and I felt terrible because I was an American. It wasn't that I did it, but you just feel awful.
The war was over on September 2nd, 1945. You were 14. Tell us about your evacuation from Switzerland.
Because my mother was Norwegian, we were able to get on a bus caravan that was taking Norwegian soldiers who had been interned in Switzerland back to Norway, and we were able to get a ride on this bus. My dad and my brother were in one bus, and my mother and my sister and I in another. And it took 3 days. We went through Hamburg, which was totally bombed. There wasn't a building standing. Little kids were out in the street. No parents to be seen. The little girls had cardboard boxes with makeshift dolls in them, and they were just pulling them along. And they loved to see the bus come in, and the Norwegian soldiers had chocolate from their rations and opened the window and offered the children chocolate, which I'm sure they hadn't seen for months. But it was a very emotional situation for me anyway.
What do you want this generation to learn from your experience?
Well, may I say, war is hell. So many people get hurt or killed. As a child, you go to bed at night with fright. And insecurities. Excuse me. Would a bomb fall on our home this night and kill my parents and leave me if I survived as an orphan? What was to become of me? How I longed for one of those pastries from the bakery. They no longer existed. All that remained in bakeries was bread, even that was scarce, because you had to have coupons in order to purchase a loaf. Every family was severely rationed. The day armistice was declared was better than a birthday. I was now 14. It took years for normalcy to return. Peace and tranquility returned. Life was good. Let's pray that we no longer have to endure a world war with all of its sorrows. That's all.
Thank you, Mom, so much for sharing your memories with us. It's very valuable that we hear from somebody that actually experienced it. So all of your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren will greatly value this video. Thanks, Mom.